In this episode, we stopped on Roanoke Island to visit the site of the Lost Colony at Fort Raleigh National Historic Site. We took a guided tour that tells the story of the Lost Colony provided by the National Park Service. Even though we were truck camping in the Outer Banks, we wanted to show this video because the story of the Lost Colony has always been intriguing to us, and we hope it will be just as interesting to you as well.
Small group. Anybody move in the last few years, 5 years? No?
Yeah, we moved from Montana. I'm originally from Montana.
Montana, okay. Well, my wife and I, right here, we moved down here about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, about 3 years. But the reason I asked that is because when we got down here, it occurred to me what a big deal moving is. Picking up in one place and moving to somewhere else. And it was then, and here I was thinking it was an even bigger deal for the 117 men, women, and children who came here in the summer of 1587 to start a new life in what for them was a very exotic and wonderful new land. They arrived in late July, which I guess as Carolinians, you know what summer is like. It's very different around here on the coast. It's humid, and so I don't know about Montana, but yeah, very different. So they arrived here in the late July of 1587. They set about refurbishing the houses that were already here. This is actually going to be the second attempt. This is the Lost Colony group, second attempt to start a settlement here on the island. As I say, they were set about reconstructing and rebuilding houses, and one of the group wandered off. You know, isn't there always one like that, you know, as everybody's working? He wandered off. His name was George Howe. And nobody'd seen George for quite a while. It was like, have you seen him? Well, later that day, this is when the first week we're here. Later that day, we found George. And he had been ambushed by a Native American scouting party and been shot with no less than 16 arrows. Think stabbed 16 times. Mm-hmm. And his head had been bashed in with a war club. It was a revenge attack. This wonderful new land that they had come to had turned into a very dangerous place. But the terrible thing is that it hadn't started that way. As a matter of fact, a couple of years before, when the English first arrived, they met with the natives on the beach just below Nag's Head. The inlets here have changed over the centuries. Oregon Inlet didn't exist. Didn't open until 1846. The two inlets that were here in the 1580s, there was one basically at Nag's Head, and one a little bit to the south where Body Island Lighthouse is located. If you have ever headed down onto Highway 12, there's actually a historic marker there that says Port Ferdinando. You'll see it along the road as you head south. That was what the English called that inlet. They named it after their pilot, Simon Ferdinando. And they met with the natives on the beach down there, and the natives brought along mats. They laid them out. You might say, welcome mats. They laid them out, and they sat there. They couldn't understand a word, not a word of what the other was saying. But they smiled a lot, and they exchanged gifts. Both sides at that point could see advantage and benefit in a relationship with the other. Both ways. From the English standpoint, when they looked at Roanoke Island here, what they saw, first of all, was a strategic location. England was locked in a bitter Cold War with Spain at this time. And Spain's power, to a large extent, depended on the river, no exaggeration, river of gold and silver that was coming up out of Mexico and South America in their ships, up along the coast, around Florida, up this way. And right about here, they'd catch the westerly winds and would cut back for Spain. So if England could put a military outpost here to base their ships, it was perfect. They could race out, attack those Spanish ships coming by, get some of that gold, weaken Spain, and if they needed to be repaired or resupplied, they could come right back here and wouldn't have to go all the way back to England. Perfect. Something else that the English saw when they looked at what they called the New World was just simply the bounty of resources here. It was just amazing. There was actually a wood shortage in England at this time. They were importing wood. Well, there was certainly no wood shortage here. Both of you came in from the west. You on 64?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. On your way home, notice the fields. You will see some very large fields. Those would have been solid trees.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, what the English saw was, when they looked at what they called the New World, was essentially a vast, undeveloped wilderness. Now, of course, if you turn the picture around the other way, the natives who lived here did not view these woods as a vast, undeveloped wilderness. No. What they saw were hunting grounds. And these hunting grounds were vital to their way of life. Because, you see, the Native Americans here did not have any domesticated animals other than dogs. No chickens, pigs, cats, sheep, goats, ducks. None of that. So if you went into a native community, you would not have heard any of the sort of barnyard sounds that you might expect to hear around an agricultural community. All right, well, what was in it for them? Why didn't they simply meet the English on the beach with a hail of arrows and drive them off? Because they saw advantage for themselves and benefit. At the top of the list for them was trade. And at the top of that list were the metal tools that the English had to offer in trade. The sharpest weapons and tools that the natives here had were either made of stone or seashells. Think for a minute. Cutting down a tree with a stone hand axe. We have a couple of good candidates right behind you here. You'll look behind you, yep. Yep. I call the skinny tree. That gives you the other tree. Or hollowing out a log for a canoe using a seashell. You'll understand why they prized metal tools. Something else that they were dazzled by was the cloth and the clothing that the English had. Now, this is winter and the colors are getting a little subdued, but the natives here did not weave any cloth. They wore animal skins. And they were encountering the English with blue and what's that, rust or something like that? Yeah, there you go. Green and a red stripe. Ooh, I like that. And so forth. They were dazzled by what they saw. And it actually led to one of the first misunderstandings between these two very different groups of people. Because the leader of the English expedition at some point or other said something like, you know, what is the name of this fair land? Yeah, I saw that in a movie. and the chief came back and he said, Wingundakan. So they noted that down. Wingundakan. Back to England, the information went. All through the fall and winter of 1584, I guess it was 4 and 5, the talk of Queen Elizabeth's court was all about Sir Walter Raleigh's new settlement in Wingundakan. And even the Spanish spies and their diplomats picked it up. And you can find in the Spanish archives today information about the new English pirate base in Wingundakan. It took about 6 months before the English learned enough Algonquian and the Algonquians learned enough English that they came to understand that Wingundakan wasn't actually the name of the place. What he had said was, dude, you wear great clothes. Walter Raleigh thought that was funny too, believe it or not. Yeah. So now you know why they changed the name to Virginia, you see? A little more to it than that, but clearly a name change had moved up to the top of their list. Yeah. He didn't really say dude. This is an Eastern tribe, not a California tribe, so no dude. So, okay, where are we? We got metal tools, we got cloth and clothing. I mentioned that England was locked in a Cold War with Spain. Hey, well, life on this side of the Atlantic wasn't gumdrops and rainbows. Who knew? Let me show you a picture. This is a picture painted by John White, the governor of the Lost Colony. We believe this man to be named Wingina. He was the chief, the paramount chief of the village here on the island as well as villages on the mainland. Wingina was unable to meet with them on that first scouting mission because he had been severely wounded in battle with the Pamlicos, their enemies to the south. Off to the west, just over there, were the Mangoak, the deadly Mangoak. That name means rattlesnakes in their language, so you get an idea of what they thought of them. We know them as the Tuscarora, if you know about native tribes. The Tuscarora eventually migrated north all the way to New York State and joined the Iroquois, a very powerful native confederation up in upstate New York. That was their neighbor to the west. So they saw the English as potential allies in their own wars, which could be ferocious. One more thing. Around Wingina's neck, you see the square where my finger's pointing? Mm-hmm. That's a piece of copper. The Native Americans valued copper the way the English valued gold. It was wonderful to look at, took a beautiful shine. And like gold, copper represented power. If you had it, people would do things for you in exchange for copper. And he's actually going to use some of the copper that he's going to accumulate in trade in ways that the English had never imagined. More about that later. Okay, well, based on this, what both sides saw in it for themselves, the English were given permission to build a settlement here on Roanoke Island. They didn't elbow their way onto the island. They were given permission. Why? Because both sides saw something in it for themselves. Well, all right. From a great start like this, what could possibly go wrong? Well, let's see. There's the weather. I'm going to roll a couple of things together and call them unforeseen circumstances. There is the human factor, isn't there always? Mm-hmm. And there was the visitor from outer space. I see doubt on some of your faces. I know what it looks like. I know. Well, just wait. All will be revealed. So why don't we go ahead and move this expedition back to the earthwork at the back of the property. And you're a very small group, but a very nice group. So as a special bonus, I'm also going to reveal a 400-year-old espionage secret that may tell us where at least some of the lost colony got themselves lost.
All right.
Follow me. The English came back, and the first thing they tried was that military option that I talked about. This is going to be 107 young men, mainly all soldiers. They came here in the summer of 1585. They're the ones who built the earthwork that you see behind me. What you see is reconstructed, but, well, then as now, the earthwork was made of earth and had eroded way, way down over the centuries, but the outline was still there. Archaeologists were able to come in, redig the trenches, build it back up the way it had been. What you see is reconstructed, but it is reconstructed on the footprint of what those soldiers did back more than 400 years ago. When they came back, the inlets that I mentioned earlier, where they met on the beach, are located here. When they came back, by the way, we're here. When they came back, they tried to gain access way down here where Ocracoke Inlet is today, either at Ocracoke or very near to it. And they ran their flagship, the Tiger. I love that, the Tiger. They ran it aground. The inlets around here, as well as the sounds, are very shallow and they shoal up. I mean, quite shallow. You'd be surprised. My wife and I were on the ferry from Ocracoke to Swan Quarter on the mainland, and it ran aground. And they do it every day, and they have electronics. So the shoals move. It's very tricky. And for vessels with a deeper draft, it can be real hazardous. They were able to save the ship, but they were not able to save the food. The year before, that wouldn't have been so much of a problem. They did some trading for food. They had their own food, but did some trading. But now they're going to be depending on the natives in a way that they hadn't before. And this is going to put pressure on this relationship right from the get-go. While they're down there repairing the ship, they decided to do some visiting, some exploring. By the way, this map was painted by John White as well, as is a picture I'm going to show you in a minute. They did some visiting, and they visited villages that looked like this. This was one of the villages they visited. And they took along a silver cup. You might wonder, why would they do that? Well, our best guess is they took it along to say, do you have any shiny metal like this stuff? If you do, we'd like to trade for it. They didn't. But the cup went missing. The English decided it had been stolen. Now, not without reason. There had been some stealing from their boats. But then again, the natives had been feeding them. Protocol demanded that. So maybe they thought it was a gift, or maybe they thought it was payment, or hey, maybe an Englishman stole it. We don't know. It's still gone. But they decided it had been stolen. They sent a young man named Philip Amadas to go back and get the cup. Now, young Phil was a fellow, I say young, he was 20 years old. He had been the captain, by the way, of one of the two ships on the scouting mission the year before, the captain, one of the two, at the age of 19. Wow. He's back. He's a veteran. He's 20 years old. Sent to get the boss's cup back. He says, cup. They say, what do you do when you're an ambitious 20-something young soldier and you've been sent to get the boss's cup back and you get this for a reaction? What do you do?
Go looking for it.
Keep going.
Keep going. Go looking for it. No. He didn't kill anyone. He didn't kill anyone. Nope. He burned their village. Yeah. Need I say this did not endear the English to the natives? No. They were showing a side that the natives hadn't seen the year before, and that is the English could be a bit unpredictable, and they could be violent. By the way, just a little aside, any dog lovers among the group? One? No?
Just me.
Two. If you look really closely where my finger is pointing, that's one of the first pictures of a North American dog ever painted. This is dog class of 1585. Anyway, to continue. So he burns the village. What's interesting, though, is it didn't derail the deal to build here. You would think it might have, but it didn't. I like to think of Philip Amadas, by the way, as kind of a historical banana peel. You know, kind of one of those people or circumstances that nobody sees coming and sends history on its head. Anyway, onward they come. They build their settlement here. What do they do when they get here? More visiting. I really wish I could call back across history. I do. Stop visiting. I could change. Let me do it again. Stop visiting. I could change history, but they can't hear me. To be fair, these visits are friendly and neighborly. They're led by a man named Thomas Harriot. He's from Oxford University. He is very sympathetic to the natives. He wants to learn about them. He wants to learn about their culture, their religion, how their society is put together. He wants to learn all about them. He's probably the one who learned their language first, about Wingandakan. Probably him. But, friendly or not, neighborly or not, a couple of days after one of these friendly visits, people started to get sick and die. Now, one thing is clear. Oh, by the way, this included the chief's younger brother, Wingina, who I showed you. His younger brother and father, and both of these men are very strong supporters of the English being here in this relationship. They are now permanently off the stage. There's another faction of the tribe that are not too keen on the idea. This will play in later on. So, one thing is certain. Neither the Native Americans nor the English had even the slightest idea about germs. None. But both sides realized that this disease outbreak that was raging had something to do with these visits. The natives were getting sick and dying, and the English weren't. After a while, the natives decided that the English were using kind of witchery, kind of sorcery, dark power against them. And it was at this time that the visitor from outer space appeared. You thought I was kidding, didn't you? I wouldn't joke about something like that. No, in the fall of 1585, a comet appeared, was visible here at Roanoke Island. And both the English and the natives viewed comets as dark, sinister signs in the sky. So right on cue, to confirm the Native Americans' darkest suspicions, a comet appears. You really couldn't make this up. But it happened, right here. So on through the winter, relations continue to deteriorate. By spring, Wingina has recalculated the math. The other side now has his ear. And maybe this relationship isn't such a great idea after all. And he cuts off their food. He forbids the villages under him to trade for food anymore. Both sides, by the English and the natives, have planted. But it's spring. Food takes a while to grow. Yeah. The English feel it immediately. And also at this time, they hear that he's using some of that copper, power. He's using some of that copper. Let me flip to the map here. He's offering, as they noted in their journals, a great quantity of copper to the tribes that lived on the north shore of Albemarle Sound, up where Elizabeth City and so forth, they're up on the north shore there. To the tribes there, to send their warriors down here to a great ceremony honoring his late father. But the English hear through the back channel that all these warriors who have gathered, by the way they gathered would be basically where Man's Harbor, that's where the village was, essentially right about there. All these warriors who have gathered, it's actually a cover for an attack. They're going to come across the sound and either attack and kill or just drive these English away. The English strike first. They kill Wingina. Now in native society, you could take a chief captive, you could hold him for ransom, but you didn't kill a chief. This is an outrage of just tremendous proportion. Could have led to a general uprising of all of the tribes around here. But it didn't, because the English were out of here so quickly. Right at this time, Sir Francis Drake appeared offshore with a fleet of ships. He had been raiding Spanish settlements down in the Caribbean and their ships. He was on his way home, heading back to England. He stopped here to see how they were doing. And they said, well, not real good. And he said, well, I can loan you give you some ships. I can give you some supplies. Or I could take you back to England. He chose door number 2. And the English were out of here so quickly. The word stampede pretty well hits it. That they accidentally left 3 of their own men behind, who were, of course, never heard from again. So it was into this hornet's nest of a situation that 117 men, women, and children, citified folks, kind of like us, actually, citified folks used to their creature comforts, found themselves dumped in the summer of 1587. Dumped is the word, because they weren't actually even supposed to be placed here. The pilot of the trip was supposed to drop them up here where Virginia Beach and Chesapeake are located today, up on Chesapeake Bay, Hampton Roads. He got this far and said he wanted to go raiding Spanish ships, and it was getting late in the season. So, off. So here they found themselves. They too were short on food, like the soldiers before, short on food. So they sent John White, who painted all these great pictures, back to England to get food and help. White arrives back in England to find an England that is absolutely on the knife edge of invasion. Spain has had enough, attacking their settlements and their ships. They're putting together a huge fleet of ships called the Armada. You probably remember it from school or the History Channel or whatever. Huge fleet of ships, more than 130 ships, just over the horizon there. They're going to invade and deal with this English problem once and for all. Off in the west of England, Sir Walter Raleigh is putting together a little relief expedition for here. But these are the days when ships moved by wind, no motors, and the wind can be remarkably contrary sometimes. This is one of them. Contrary winds hold him in port, this little fleet in port, just days, but long enough for the rider to arrive from London with a message from the Queen and the Council. You're not going anywhere. We need every ship we can muster to fight this Armada just over there. Oh, and those settlers off there in faraway Virginia, well, they'll just have to wait. And they waited, and they waited, and they waited 3 years. 3 years. John White stepped ashore at dawn on August 18th, 1590. And the sound that greeted his ears was...
Nothing.
Well, maybe the buzz of morning birds, summer buzz of insects. The sound that did not greet his ears were the voices of the 117 men, women, and children that he left here. Citified folks, mainly from London. The voice of his own daughter, Eleanor, and her young husband were among them. Or the voice of his little granddaughter, Virginia Dare, who had been born in that 1 month that he was here back in 1587. They were gone. Near the shore, he found a tree, and on the tree were carved the letter C-R-O. In that 1 month that he was here, we talked with John. What would we do? What would we do? This is far too dangerous. Our good friend, George Howe, you recall, just days after we arrived, was most brutally killed. You remember, right? Far too dangerous. What could we do? Well, one of the things we talked about doing was moving the whole settlement 50 miles into the Maine. That meant mainland. Something else we talked about that John just pleaded with us to do was to please leave a message give him some direction as to where we went if we move out from here. And if we're leaving in terrible haste, like if we're running for our lives and under attack, either paint across or carve across over the location. When John came to the settlement, one of the gateposts leading into the settlement had the word Croatoan carved on it. But there was no cross. Adding to the mystery of it, when he went into the settlement, the houses that we had labored on so long and hard during those sweaty days of July and August, those brutally hot days, hadn't been burned down or knocked down like in an attack. No. They were taken apart and taken away. Where? Croatoan. Ta-da, mystery solved, right? Well, first of all, what is it? What is Croatoan? What is Croatoan? Croatoan is actually it's kind of mysterious to us, but it's actually the old name for Hatteras Island. It was also the name of a tribe, the Croatoans. Manteo, for whom the town is named, was a Croatoan. He was a leader of the Croatoans and a very strong friend of the English. So it would make sense. Croatoan, off we go. But this is the start. 1587 is the start of one of the worst droughts to hit this area in hundreds of years, like 800 years, where food had been maybe a little tight the year before. Now it's critical. So later historians are going to doubt that all 117 of us just trooped down to Manteo and the Croatoans. Do you think he can really feed all 117 of us for breakfast, lunch, and dinner in the middle of a drought? And we have no idea how long this drought when it will end. Good Lord, may it be soon. But we don't know, do we? So what they think we did was that about 20 or 30 of us might have headed down to Croatoan. It's easier to feed 20 or 30 people than it is to feed over 100. 20 or 30 headed down there. But what about the rest? Well, I mentioned espionage before. I'm going to show you a piece of Elizabethan spycraft. It is hidden in this map. But before I do, I need to mention that the National Park Service is sharing this information with you on a need-to-know basis. Loose lips, ladies and gentlemen, sink ships. That said, I'm going to give you a hint. It's on the left side of the map.
I already know where it is.
Oh, okay.
Me too.
Good. Very good.
Isn't that?
No? Is it what?
Shows it that.
That's good. That's got sharp eyes. Close. No cigar. See where my finger is pointing? The stain where my finger is pointing?
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
That's not a stain.
Blood.
It's a patch. And that patch sat there for more than 400 years. This map kept it secret for more than 400 years. And nobody said, "What's that?" until 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2012 they did. Now I mentioned it's 400 years old. I did not mention that it's also in the British Museum, this map. Now you do not take a razor blade to a 400-year-old map in the British Museum and go to find out what's under a patch. No, you just can't do that. So they made a combination of a little low-tech with a little high-tech, some infrared and ultraviolet, and they even used a light box. And they looked through the patch, leaving it in place, but looked through it. And when they did, I'm sure it's right side up here, this is what they found under the patch. That's the symbol for either a fort or a settlement. By the way, look a little familiar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A fort or a settlement under the patch. By the way, let's see who's listening. We're here.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
How far do you think it is over here?
50
50
miles, maybe.
Bingo. 50 miles into the main.
Mm-hmm.
Archaeologists call this Site X. They've been looking at it since 2012. They've found a fair amount of English pottery. Enough to say, yep, that's where they went? No. It's not a piece or two. They estimate the number of pieces they found came from about 19 different vessels, plates, bowls, whatever. But is it enough to say a large group of English people were living here for an extended period of time? No. They're continuing to look. They've looked down here at Cape Hatteras, same story. Pottery enough? No. They've even found the hilt from a kind of sword they used, a rapier. Down here at Cape Hatteras. They're continuing to look down there. Oh. Wait. Maybe we're jumping to conclusions about this spy stuff. Maybe John White just corrected his map. You know, sure, we were going to build here, but we didn't. So, makes sense, right? No. Because you see, when they looked through the patch, like I said, it attracted their attention to the patch itself. And the closer they looked at the patch, they realized that someone had drawn the symbol that was under the patch, like I showed you, had drawn it on the patch. Except where they drew it on the patch, they used invisible ink. You know, like someone was trying to hide something?
Mm-hmm.
You see, in the 1580s, this was highly, highly sensitive information. The Spanish knew they were up here. They just didn't know where, and they really wanted to know. Remember Wingandakan? They knew. So there's one more possibility, and I think this is the most painful of the three, for me, I think. One very noted historian, you might even say the dean of the historians of the Lost Colony here, a man named David Deers Quinn, thinks they took a small ship that was left here with them, brought from England and left here with them, and used the ship to ferry the group up here to where Virginia Beach and Chesapeake are located. The ship could hold about 50 people. A couple of trips for the people, a couple more trips for the building supplies and furniture and other stuff. It's only 90 miles, about 90 miles up here. It's very doable. But they planted here, replanted, the bulk of the colony planted here. Maybe here too, but here. Why painful? Well, 20 years later, the English were back. Jamestown, 1607, 1587, 1607. And all of eastern Virginia at that time was ruled by a tribe called the Powhatan, very powerful confederation of tribes, not unlike the Iroquois group of tribes, powerful, ruled all of eastern Virginia, had conquered more than 30 tribes from Southside Hampton Roads all the way to the Potomac River, where Washington is today. Basically everything east of I-95, conquered, subjugated, and they took tribute up and down eastern Virginia. Powerful group. Powhatan, the leader of the Powhatans, his actual name, by the way, was Wahun Sunakak. There's a name you don't hear much anymore, do you? He told John Smith, you know, Pocahontas and John Smith, that John Smith, he told John Smith that just before the English arrived, very shortly before they arrived, his priests had given them a prophecy, that the doom of the Powhatan would come from the Chesapeake. We think Chesapeake Bay because that's what we know about. The Chesapeakes were actually a tribe. Where did they live? Right here. Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, that area. Interestingly enough, they were not among the conquered. They were on the southern fringe of his territory. Now, I ask you what you'd do if you were a 20-something young soldier. What would you do if you were a mighty war chief and you were given a prophecy like that?
Snuff them out.
Yeah. He sent a large body of his warriors and paid the Chesapeakes a visit and massacred every one of them. That's what he did. And he replaced them with another tribe that he would trust at his back. Where it bears on what we're looking at is that he told John Smith that caught up in the attack were people like you. He showed him a musket barrel from an early kind of musket called a matchlock that his warriors had grabbed in the attack. He showed him a mortar, not like a cannon mortar, but one of these mortar and pestle jobs that his warriors had grabbed. His Wahun Sinakok, Powhatan's brother-in-law, I always forget the relationship, brother-in-law told a second Englishman more details about these very unusual people. He said they built their houses one on top of another. 2-story houses. Natives didn't do that. They were getting bits of information, tantalizing bits of information about, like, 4 men and a maid who had escaped the massacre had found shelter with the Roanokes. Roanokes are down in North Carolina, basically across the river from Edenton on the mainland, or on the to the west, across the Chowan River. They were never able to make contact with them. Why painful? I find the timing so painful. It makes it to me like really. It was close. We don't know how close. It might have been the attack, might have been the year before, 1606. But there's a very good indication that it might have been as late April of 1607. The English founded Jamestown on May 14th, 1607. So if that's the case, and the bulk of us moved up here to Virginia Beach and Chesapeake, that would mean that we were living among the Chesapeakes peacefully for, let's see, 19 years, 11 months, and 2 weeks. And came up 2 weeks short of reconnecting. Can I have an ouch? Ouch. I'll give it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, close. Questions?
That sounds like relatively new information that I hadn't heard before. Where is that coming out of? In terms of like
The Chesapeakes?
yeah.
The annihilation of the Chesapeakes is fairly widely accepted. Whether the Lost Colony was there, they have not found. They have. It's interesting. At Site X and down in Hatteras, they have archaeology in terms of pottery and this kind of stuff, but almost no documentation. In fact, I can't think of any documentation. They may be distant about their activity. Up there, they have documentation, but they don't have archaeology. They've never found. The town was called the native village, or it was actually described as a big village, a city, or the natives called it a city. It was Skikoak. It was on the south branch of the Elizabeth River. Beers Quinn thinks it might be as far down on the Elizabeth. If you think of where Deep Creek is located, if you know, well, you're from west of here, you wouldn't know that, but heading in that direction, Deep Creek, if you went over to the east, it's that far down the south branch. Others think it might be in Norfolk, that Norfolk had actually obliterated the city of has essentially obliterated the site where it was. But that in that area it might have been far. They think it's farther up the river, so but they've never found it, so they don't have archaeology to back it up. So anyway,
That's interesting.
yeah. One last thought before we get out of here. I was a newspaper reporter for about 10 years, and we all have a weird thing we do with news. If it's far away, like if I tell you about an earthquake in Mongolia. By the way, I had someone from Mongolia one year. She's beaming as I said that. In Mongolia, your reaction is, that's too bad.
Right.
Oh, but if I tell you about an earthquake in upper South Carolina or Piedmont, North Carolina somewhere, it's like, well, Western Carolina, there was an earthquake recently in Western Carolina. Oh, now you're sitting up straight. Now you're wondering, who do I know in that area? Weren't the kids going there on the field trip next week? Oh my, that was close. Or my supplier, good grief, what is that going to do to the project or my business or whatever? All of a sudden is now real, well, let's coin a word, realer to you. Time does the same thing, but even more so. What we're looking at here, this isn't a story, with little cardboard figures going across a stage to some predetermined outcome called history. No. For 117 men, women, and children, citified folks, a lot like you and me, this was real life during their brief visit here at Motel Earth. Yeah. And you know something they didn't. You know how it came out. For them, it was in play. So let me wrap with a question. As you think about this whole business, about these folks, these people, ask yourself, how many times do you think you would have gone down to the beach to look for a sail on the horizon?
Every day. I probably live on the beach.
I get that. Every day. And one more thing. I don't want to add to your worries as you stand down there in the sand. And I don't want to dash your hopes. But the day you do see a sail, could be Spanish. Anyway, thank you. While you're here, if you're interested, a beautiful day for it. You see the rail fences through the trees over there? Mm-hmm. That's the trailhead for a very nice nature walk back there. It's kind of rolling, but not very challenging. About a third of a mile long. Goes in a loop. It'll bring you back out again. Nice spot for a nice day for it. Check out these pass side signs as well. They've got some nice pictures. You can go into the fort. So forth. Archaeologists were over in that clearing over there. There was a workshop where one of Sir Walter Raleigh's, he sent a metallurgist here with the military guys. A couple of expeditions before this, unrelated, a guy had come back with a boatload of very valuable ore. They thought it was gold. It was fool's gold. Well, Raleigh didn't want that kind of embarrassment, so he sent his own metallurgist, and he worked right over there. So, anyway, enjoy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that spot right here, over there where it's roped off or cautioned off, I think that's where they did their latest expedition or excavating.
Let's go check it out.
you watched this video to the end, we wanted to say thanks for watching. Be sure to join us again next week as we travel to another beautiful destination and share with you how we live in our truck bed camper.